Well, it's.
Oh. Thank you. Go ahead, John.
I call this meeting to order of the Development Impact Fee Advisory Committee at 5:30 this evening. And I will turn it over. The presentation is coming from Mayor,
City staff, I think, yeah.
City Staff and Mayor.
Or do you want to do minutes?
No,
Approval of minutes?
We'll do that then, won't we? Or
Do
the minutes from
Oh,
this
yeah.
last.
I'll motion to approve the minutes from the last impact fees study meeting.
Okay, do we have a second? Second, we do have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes.
And probably just a good idea to do a roll call or just announce who's here to make sure.
Chairman Hastings, Commissioner Benner, committee member Wolfschlager, Commissioner,
Boy.
Boyd, Simmons, Reimeyer are all here. Commissioners Torpy and Dunkel are absent.
Excellent. Well, I'll jump in.
Yes.
Chairman, if you don't mind, and
Please.
Sarah and Fonda, feel free to join. Thanks for all being here tonight. The primary reason for being here tonight is because of a stipulation in the Idaho code that talks about 678210-4 about the time period that you hold impact fees. And that is 8 years, and the expenditure is on first in, first out. We've been collecting impact fees on the various categories, since 2011. And this category transportation, those transportation impact fees are paired up and allocated to a very specific capital improvement plan. As you can see in one of the attachments, the VMT capacity road improvements attachment. These are or were at the time of adoption the elements of the capital improvement plan where our impact fees for transportation would be allocated. Now we generally have the flexibility to move those and do one project if it's more relevant than another. But specific to the fees that we've collected, some of those fees are approaching the 8-year time period. And for the projects that we mentioned that we were trying to, our highest priority projects that are eligible for impact fees, that time period is coming up. So those two projects are the two-way traffic reversion downtown. Idaho codes just says that you have to have a reason basis for extending your hold on those collections. Sometimes that might be because you ran into a design challenge or other legitimate reasons, but it doesn't appear to be a bright line of what that criteria is for holding them longer than 8 years. In this case, many of you know, we've been in a multi-year process with ITD discussions, conversions, reversions to get our downtown streets back so they could be two ways. And that's the primary reason that we're here tonight, is that that process took longer than the 8 years that was anticipated or that's in code. So we're asking for your recommendation to the council. They'll have to adopt a statement saying that we're holding these fees longer than 8 years because of this rationale or this reason, this basis. And that basis is that project took longer than anticipated because of negotiations with ITD. So that's the first one, is to extend the holdover period for those transportation fees beyond that 8 years. And we do have that Fifth and Pine Light project planned for this next fall. And that's what these dollars would go to fund in their proportional amounts that are listed in that VMT table in the packet. The second aspect of this tonight is to redirect some of those fundings from what had been anticipated two-way conversion to our next highest priority impact fee eligible. The record show that Lowe's Dunkel has arrived. The next highest priority, which is Ontario, the realignment. If you haven't seen the plans or the concept, it is to realign Ontario. So we're not meeting at that angle on Highway 2. So it's actually a safe 90-degree, you can pull on, you can look left and right. It's one of the most dangerous intersections in Sandpoint. Anyways, the second part of this request is to have your recommendation to move $100,000 in impact fees towards that project, which is impact fee eligible as well. Certainly entertain any questions. We've got Sarah and Fonda here, of course, who can drill into anything if you have
Mr. Mayor?
further questions.
Yeah, I just wondered, just generally, I guess for my own education, I'm not sure I got it in the first meeting, what's the sort of general fungibility around these funds?
Well, they're not super fungible.
Yeah.
So impact fee study will, and this is why they cost so much money and are very time consuming to put together, because they have to show specifically the proportionality of the impact and what each house or square foot of commercial space is contributing to that impact. And then you have to separate deficiencies from other things. So you can't use impact fees to pay for existing deficiencies. So if you'll see on this chart here that was in your,
Yeah, that's what I was.
all the way to the right there, it'll say gross share, city's cost, gross shares versus gross dollars. So in this impact fee report, it actually goes through the methodology and says, this is why one project might be 95% attributed to growth and another one might only be 19% attributed to growth. So the fungibility is limited. Once that analysis is done, you have your parks. We have parks, and that's broken up even more finer grain into park land acquisition, park amenities such as swing sets and things like that, develop park cost, and then into fire and police, and then transportation, and then we have pathways as well.
Gotcha.
So you can't change them between categories. Within the category, there's some limitation. But on the transportation, what we're talking about here, this is called a plan-based element of impact fees. There's another one called incremental, whereas the dollars come in, you just build another mile of pathway. Our pathways, for example, are incrementally based, the study. This one is plan-based. The plan is right here, our CIP, and these are the projects in the plan. So that's a long answer to your question, but
So it's earmarked.
they're generally
Got it.
Restricted
Okay.
funds.
Mr. Mayor. And that was kind of somewhat my question a little bit. The funds can only be transferred back and forth around in their category in the transportation. You can't go and say, okay, I want to move some from transportation to parks.
No, absolutely
Correct.
not. Absolutely not.
So you have impact fees that are collected specifically for transportation, that's its own fee schedule. And specifically for parks, it's its own fee schedule, and once they're paid by the developer or the builder and they're earmarked, they have to stay within that category.
Category, if not specific project.
They won't stay in a specific project, they'll stay in the
Correct, yeah.
category.
Okay.
And if you want to know more, a developer can ask for an individual assessment if they don't like the methodology or think their project is unique, or their project includes components that are going, like, what if a developer built a park? It wasn't required to, but if they did, they could come back and say, I want an assessment. I've provided the park land acquisition, the park amenities.
Who funds that? Who funds that individual study?
The city would have to do that.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
So, yeah, they can, and then there's exceptional impacts that go beyond impact fees. That extraordinary impacts, thank you. That the city in some circumstances could go out and say, yes, you paid your impact fees, but we didn't contemplate what you're doing.
Yeah.
You have
Oh,
other
gotcha.
impacts on the city that you'd be responsible for to try to exact from them.
So there's some corner case stuff, but generally funds are earmarked. And even within category, they're subset and earmarked.
Correct.
And so it's first in, first out. There's an 8-year tenure. Then these are the options on what to do at this point.
Correct.
Got it.
And a failure, I'm sorry,
Go ahead.
a failure to extend will require repayment of these funds back to the developers.
Hmm,
That's
okay.
what the statute
Oh,
requires.
that is good to know.
got it, okay.
And that can become challenging
Okay.
because the developer builds the house, Idagon built it, for example.
Yeah.
Amelia buys it, she's actually paid for the fee, but the fee wouldn't
Oh
go
my
back to
goodness,
the
yeah, yeah,
developer, you gotta track the developer down, find out who that was, are they alive, they in the state.
Are they bankrupt?
Are they jail? Yeah.
Is there a trustee involved?
Right, so it gets a little tangled, so
Yikes.
best practice is to spend them in 8 years, but certain projects do require a holdover due to certain circumstances.
Got it. Thank you.
And your comprehensive planning process, which you guys are in right now, is really important in ultimately feeding what your impact fees will be. So your comprehensive planning process drives your master plans drive your capital improvement projects. And your capital improvement projects speak directly to
Gotcha.
what is eligible for impact fees and what is not. So it all flows out of your comprehensive plan.
Someday.
You're almost there.
Yeah.
You're gonna make it.
We thought we were.
You're gonna make it.
Next week, I think we're there.
Couple speed bumps. Okay.
Very close.
So, in terms of it, it's not super exciting, but, I think it's pretty clear. But if there aren't any other questions, there's a couple of, motions, I think, in
And council
Just-
cannot act on this without recommendation from you.
Okay.
And just a couple general questions I might have. First, one, the timing on both the Pine Street relocation of the stoplight and then the Ontario, do we know?
yeah, so the Fifth and Pine Light, work is, scheduled, we're aiming for this fall.
Okay.
And then the Ontario would go into preliminary design, this year and next year. And probably won't be constructed until 26.
And from looking at the numbers here, and I'm not a street engineer by any fashion, but it's certainly total cost 430,000 for that Ontario project.
This was 2011.
Okay, so that seems like a really low number.
Yeah.
That's-
So,
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
It is a low number. It is. a low number.
there is an indexing in the study that allows the city to index those fees so that they stay relevant, but yeah, those are
Gotcha.
older numbers.
Okay. Do we have any other questions? Are we ready to entertain a motion?
Ivan looks like he has questions.
No. You answered most of them.
I'm happy to throw it out there. All right. I move to recommend that city council extend the transportation impact fee expenditure period for collections from 2015 through 2017. $271,445 from 8 to 11 years to allow CIP project S-012 downtown two-way operation identified in the development impact fee study be implemented. The reason for the expenditure period extension is due to time needed for negotiation and permitting with the Idaho Transportation Department to implement the project.
I'll second.
Any discussion? And we'll treat both of these motions separately. It works out then. Do we need a roll call vote? Or can we by acclamation?
I'd just go for all ayes or all nays.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any nays? Motion passes. And the second motion?
Should I play through here?
You may as well.
I move to recommend that city council transfer $100,000 in transportation impact fees from project number S-012 East-West Connection / Pine Street Signal to S-036 Ontario Street Realignment.
I'll second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes.
The only thing I'd like to clarify for motions next time is that you have project number S-012 titled one thing in the paren in motion 1 and titled something different in motion 2. So just so we are consistent. Or is the project number different?
You're extending is S12, but the transfer is from S012 to S036.
Yes.
All right, just making sure we're
The
being
numbers are
clear.
correct. Okay.
Yeah.
The project number, okay.
I probably should have brought it up. Did the COVID period,
It was not, there was not a stay during COVID,
Okay.
but that's a good question.
thought that might be an easy one.
Well, I will say, there wasn't an automatic stay. The council could have exercised their emergency powers during that period to put a stay on, but that did not happen.
That means we had things in order,
Mhm.
so we didn't need to pull that one.
Well, thank you all so much. Going forward, we'll be working with Sarah and the council and I and Amy and others will be working on regular updates to you on where collections are and projects that are being slated and all that good stuff. So,
And the status of the RFP for the update.
yes, so we're working on an RFP for a consultant. Once that's put together, you'll be involved in the selection of that consultant, so.
How long do those studies normally take?
They take a while. I've worked on 5 of them and with Tisha Bice, and those were all 8 to 12 months,
Okay.
some 14 months.
Got it.
I'm doing one with Priest River that's a little shorter than that right now.
So
but,
all in, we're probably about 18 months out.
yeah,
Does that feel about right?
a little less maybe, they're pretty involved. They look at, growth projections, building permits. The nice part about doing right now is we can pull right off of the 2020 census. And then you just add our building permits to that and you get a super accurate projection of growth. And then that all ties into the sausage making of the analysis. You'd love it. I think.
Yeah,
I get lost in the weeds.
It's, I've never seen spreadsheets
Yeah,
like this.
right
you're probably 18 months to get a recommendation to
progressions.
council for adjustment of fees and adopt it, I would say.
Yeah.
Study and
Yeah, all
adoption of
in.
a new fee schedule, you can probably get done in 18 months.
And typically those are, first they do a land use analysis check-in. They'll say, we pulled all your building permit data. This is where you're at. This is your growth projection. Then they'll come back and visit with finance and fire and all the various departments. They'll look at your needs. They'll do assessment. Here's an example. So with a new facility, a pickleball facility or
Yeah.
Russell facility, we will have a much higher value of our facilities, our park facilities, our park amenities. So that will,
Oh, interesting.
and think of these as you're freezing
Yeah.
Sandpoint today and
Yep.
saying, our taxpayers have paid for everything we have.
Yeah.
And our government collections, taxes, operations should be able to maintain them. Now, if another 5,000 people come, we have 2 choices. We either build more facilities to maintain our level of service.
Yep.
Or we don't build anything new and we degrade our level of service. We put 5,000 more people in these buildings.
Keep pressing.
So it's really that determination of the level of service, what goes into per person cost to maintain that, maintain acres, maintain facilities, maintain parkland, maintain fire roads, all that. So it's, so then they'll come back and they'll show you those costs, those elements, and then typically it's another month or so to wrap that up into the fee. And then the thing to keep in mind, consultants will bring the maximum legal proportional fee. The council does not have to adopt.
Got it.
You don't have to recommend at the maximum fee.
That'll be an upper bound. Okay.
That is a political decision.
Okay.
The thing is, if you don't adopt the maximum support fee, then either the general fund is gonna have to backfill to maintain that level of service, to build new parks and things, or your level of service is gonna decline. So it comes down to, and I can, Amy and I and others can get you all sorts of studies. There's perspectives that impact fees are bad because they're gonna retard growth.
Yeah,
And we're not in a vacuum. if we have them and Dover doesn't, or Sagal doesn't, growth will just go there, so you're really just pushing growth somewhere else. There's the perspective that, you know, they're gonna affect affordable housing. Around here, most fees are, in all reality, the difference between going with stainless steel or the black or the specialty appliances, it's a couple $1,000 in a home build. And then, you know, there's the question of bait and switch. If you don't have them, you're basically saying, come to our community, we've got great parks and services, but without fees,
Yeah.
there's no way we
But
can
guess
maintain
what?
this.
Yeah.
So it's a bait and switch.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, you know, they're a very conservative way to make sure that existing taxpayers aren't paying for the expansion of facilities they've already paid for, and that the people causing the growth and the impact are paying their proportional share.
While maintaining the same level of service.
Yeah, but the proportionality is a big thing.
Exactly.
You can't just pick a
Yeah.
number out of the sky and say,
Yeah.
let's
Yeah.
build a new pickleball center, and everyone's we want it bigger and nicer, so new people have to pay, so.
And you should, when that study comes out with the upper end of the recommendation, this commission should have a very robust conversation and dialogue around the recommendation that you make to council. One of my other cities, for instance, the recommendation came in for you know, it'll be broken down in different categories, but this is just an example. A drive-through restaurant like a Burger King or a McDonald's,
Yeah.
and the impact of that on transportation versus a sit-down restaurant. And the committee said, we can't in good conscience charge $37,000 for a drive-through restaurant that's a block away from a sit-down restaurant that only costs $7,000 in impact fees. So you really want to analyze, what are these categories? What is this saying? And have a robust conversation around how it fits within your community here, both your economic structure as well as your land use structure. And, you know, there's a reason that the statute requires this type of body. It has some specific requirements. It can be your planning and zoning commission, but as long as you have at least 2 members, and that's why we have some non-commission members who are part of your business community and are part of the real estate or commercial aspect of your economic community. It's to have those, make sure you have all of the voices at the table that are most likely impacted. So when the study comes out, you will want to study it, review it, analyze it, understand it, and prepare for some robust conversation around that. So
18 months from now or so.
18 months from now,
Got it.
yeah, somewhere in there.
There are increments along the way. though.
There are
Yeah.
some, yeah.
Yeah.
You'll see pieces of it as it goes.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to sort of bone up on some, you can probably point us towards some stuff, Amy. Start thinking around this. Sweet.
Kind of like the comp plan. increment.
Just,
Yeah.
will the study be basically kind of the same format as the existing one?
Um,
Or do-
It
depends
depends.
who you hire.
Yeah,
If you hire Tish or Bice, that's sort of their formula.
Okay.
I mean, they're all unique. For instance, there's some places that have, within the city, there are different levels of service. So you
Mhm.
can charge different fees based on different levels of service. For example, the southeast quadrant might have great roads and their transportation fees lower. The northeast quadrant has huge, growth related deficiencies, so their fee is gonna be higher. So there are nuances. You can do it by bedroom, you can do it by square footage. We used to in Sandpoint, our previous version was just single family or multifamily. This was a big step. Our current study broke it out into bedrooms because the impact fee had discussion saying, well, it's not fair if someone's building a little home that's super efficient. They're not gonna have the impact on parks
Right.
that a 4-bedroom home is gonna have. And a multifamily, because their kids are cooped up, so they're gonna have a bigger impact on parks. Businesses, that was a big discussion that when this was adopted, there was a robust debate that commercial shouldn't have to pay the park fees. They don't pay the park fees, only residents do.
Mhm.
And I remember the council going back and forth saying, well, our parks attract people, so the businesses are benefiting. They should pay the park fees. Other people are saying, no, the residents use the parks, the businesses,
Yeah.
why should name a business, why should they pay a park impact fee? So,
And in a situation like that, is it all or nothing? Or can there be a graduation?
no, it can be
you can
graduated.
graduate.
It's a political
Yeah.
decision. And then I guess the other thing I'd say is, obviously schools are not an eligible category. I was in Boise last week and there was a robust discussion that I poked a few bears saying, why aren't schools part of the impact fees? And, you know, we allow them for everything else, but this is an equitable way to fund schools, and Idaho's kind of unique.
Relative to growth.
Right,
Yeah.
Idaho's very unique. They don't allow impact fees for schools.
Talking.
Other states do. So,
Mr. Mayor,
yes, sir.
for a second, I forgot my question. Okay, just real quick, and you've been doing this a long time, and so I'm not trying to ask you to do something that you can't do. But on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being poor, 10 being, yep, great. How are the previous impact fees are in place now holding up with the growth that we have seen over the last 2 years? The old impact fees were what, 8 years ago is when you did it?
2011.
11.
11. Woohoo. Okay,
But indexed, I haven't followed, yeah, but the city did have the ability to index them to inflation, so.
so anyway, how are they holding up? Are we reaching a point where they are not currently meeting so that you're on the decline as
Yeah.
opposed to?
Levels of service. You know, that's a good question, Ivan. I
Might
can't-
deserve an answer in private.
Thank you, attorney.
Okay, I don't wanna. I didn't mean to
give
start
That's a
that.
great question. That's a great
I
question.
can't give a comprehensive on the spot,
yeah.
response, but I would say things change. For example, remember, it's all level of service. So the Russell facility is a great example. That in our new assessment, before we could only say, this is what we have today, because you can't use them to build what you want. You have to have that level of service defined. So we did indoor facilities. The only indoor facility we had prior to the Russell Center was community hall. So they take the value of community hall, divided by $1 per square foot, divided by the population. This is what the per person cost to maintain a community hall level of service and Sandpoint is. With the Russell Center, we're gonna have this amazing new facility. So when we redo it, and the timing's actually great, we'll now be able to say, oh, we got a $7 to $8 million facility divided by 10,000 people. This is the cost to maintain indoor facilities in Sandpoint and grow and maintain that level of service. So it's always a moving, target, but in general, they're the best tool to keep up with growth out there.
You gotta be a politician.
Wait a minute, here he is. I can say just
believe you.
looking across at other jurisdictions, Sandpoint's a little low on their impact fees compared to other jurisdictions right now. So it's time, it's a good time to do a study.
And they are a land use tool. You'll notice if you get into the weeds of our current study, at the time, we were trying to incentivize development downtown. Remember 2011, we had coming out of the Great Recession, there's a lot of vacancy. So Tisha Vice was able to use some urban renewal funded projects downtown to make the impact fees in the downtown core a little bit lower. And the hope was, well, at least we're showing there's some incentive to invest in downtown versus elsewhere in town. They can be sort of a land use tool to do that sort of thing.
Are we asking for an RFQ or an RFP from these impact fee committees, and kind of some of the questions like to Ivan's, if there's questions this group has that should be part of that scope of work when we go out for these proposals as well? Like we want a forensic on the performance, from the 2011 study, because even last time we looked at the funds that were anticipated versus the funds that were generated, and they were grossly off. So is there any incentive to going back, and do other committee members have questions that would be good to be answered?
Yeah.
Or is it kind of a broad enough scope that those questions can just be answered through the process?
Most of the firms that will respond to an RFP will be qualified enough to answer all your questions. And in that scope of work, whether they look back and do an assessment is I guess up in the air. But the other thing I'll say is, you heard me talk about incremental plan-based. There are different ways of assessing the fees. One of the nice things about incremental is if the growth doesn't occur, then you don't need to build your facilities, but the money's not there either. So with incremental projects, it's well timed that if the growth happens really quickly, you're gonna have a pile of money to deal with impacts. There's also another category, cost recovery, that we didn't talk about, but if, for instance, we build a bunch of facilities that far exceed our need for level of service today. We can recover those costs. We're basically building for the future. We can recover those costs with impact fees as well. We say, we've prepared, we don't need this much of X, Y, or Z. We built it in preparation of growth. This is the cost. So those impact fees basically come to repay us. But the incremental is nice because if you hit a fast period of growth, you get a lot of money, and if you don't, then you're not collecting, and you don't need it.
Right. Is the comp plan efforts, are those gonna be completed too, for us to kind of have that final document so we can
Yeah, comp
kind
plans-
of weigh what's being proposed versus the comp plan is kind of that
Fingers
community
crossed.
voice?
Yeah, this is great timing. So comp plan is, we have a joint workshop next Tuesday, I think. And final opportunity for the council to hear and go through it. You know, I was trying not to have that happen at a council meeting, chapter or word or whatever level of detail a council member wants. In theory, next Tuesday, if we can get through it all, it'll be scheduled for a public hearing. So, and then adoption.
One other question, Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
That current impact fees, I was on the committee, I should remember this, but the current impact fees, are they charged at final plat or are they charged at building permit?
Building permit.
Building permits.
So if you develop a 25 lot place and you've finished it out and everything else, you're not paying any impact fees until such time as you get a building permit
Correct.
for that specific lot.
Right, when the impact actually occurs.
Yeah.
And the other thing on that line is there are credits too. If you took an old building downtown and, well, I'll use the Coachella building, for example. It used to be a lumber storage, facility and an office building after that. So you take the historical use, the most intense historical use, and you apply it to your impact fee. So in the non-residential and the commercial side, we have a couple categories. We've got restaurants, we've got shopping centers, we've got industrial. Previous and some other plans have like 35 categories of uses, which people like to get away from. But you would take, okay, it was a industrial with lumber storage building, you get your credit, you convert it to a office building now, and you pay the delta in your impact fee. So existing buildings get a credit for, in theory, the impact they've had on the community for their type of use stays. with
What got them
property.
to that
Yeah.
point, basically.
And then the new developer only pays the increment on what intensification they're doing to it. And to Fonda's point, there's a heavy emphasis on trip generation, vehicle miles travel. And the reason fast food restaurants have such crazy high fees is because it's all the vehicle trips coming and going, and they look at how many lanes do you need, how many intersections need to be expanded, lights, all that stuff. And the primary determinant is vehicle miles travels or trips.
And it's the perfect example of where that data-driven recommendation or suggestion turns into a political conversation. Because the political becomes, do we want to charge this highest rate and risk that we lose that type of business in our city when it can be in your neighboring city? So those are the types of things you'll be looking at.
Yeah.
Has that happened
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
on radio?
I don't know if it's happened here, but
All
in my
okay,
other state,
yeah.
it happens everywhere.
There's a school impact fee I was working on in South Carolina. It ended up being $24,000 per single family home. Went to the Supreme Court, Tishel Price did it. Building association sued. It was determined that it's valid. It's totally legal and proportional. But then you saw people, the next school district over, start building. And of course, the consultant comes in and then does their impact fees. Trickle down, so
Virtuous cycle.
it is.
So do our closest neighbors have similar or any?
Pondere has them. The Northside Fire now has them, which in my opinion is a great thing.
Who's collecting for them? Must
The
be-
county.
Oh, just the county? Do they have any cities in there? Boundary?
That's a good question.
Because their city should be
Yeah.
collecting for them too.
They would be, yeah. The county can collect one of my areas, and I'll be quick on this. It's not a map, but if you're familiar with Sandpoint, everything west of the tracks generally is our area of city impact. There's 4 roads that enter that. There's Mountain View, Gooby, Baldy, and Pine. And as growth occurs incrementally and slowly out there, at some point, maybe not my lifetime, but those intersections are gonna have to be upgraded. The railroad bridge is gonna have to be wider. And this is a great example. Why should Sandpoint taxpayers have to pay for those 4 roads to be upgraded when the people causing that, people who live west of the track? So in theory, we could work with the county to say, will you collect impact fees just for transportation, maybe for parks, in our ACI? So when building occurs out there, comes into our fund, that would then fund those improvements that we know are gonna be need to be made. A similar example is Lakeshore Road. Remember the Texas U-turn they put in there? Well, for 20 years, we've all said, oh, as growth keeps going down Lakeshore Road, they're gonna have to fix this intersection. Well, 1,000 houses later down Lakeshore Road, they fixed the intersection, but because there weren't impact fees, we all as taxpayers had to pay for that upgrade in the Texas U-turn there. If the county had transportation impact fees, the upgrading of that intersection could have been paid for by the thousands of homes down Lakeshore that caused that traffic congestion. So, yeah, it'd be great to work with the county. That's probably something we'll want to put in the RFP and see if we can.
Well, it's great as you start ACI negotiations.
Yeah.
So, and we're kind of on that topic anyway, like with Dover and Ponderay and even Kootenai being so close, is there any cross, like, it's probably hard to do, but do these other places have similar, are they looking at like the impact that we have on them because they have so much more of one thing or less, like on each side, like Dover has so like almost no commercial, but then Ponderay has a ton of commercial. So we're impacting one or the other, or they're impacting us? Is there, to that same point of the ACI with the roads or whatever, is there any collaboration or is there
Not
any?
that I know of, you would.
No, I'm not aware. I mean, that's the nice thing about impact fees in some degree, is if the impact is happening in your ACI or in your city, these studies show you exactly what that impact is. So that commercial building would say, and Ponderay would have to pay impact. But there is some opportunity for sort of collaboration. BCAT, you've heard of that, our area transportation team. We do look at projects and road projects and needs collaboratively around the area, grant funding and stuff.
And you could do a regional transportation plan for
Right,
them. And you could identify capital improvement projects that would utilize shared impact fees. It does require cooperation and everybody working together, but it can be done.
And Fonda, would you be able to speak about, it's always sort of a gray area for me, the NUFs and or is that not like the difference between like sewer, because didn't Hayden have a little problem?
They had cap fees, so they had a cap fee problem, meaning that they were charging the cap fees, they got sued over it.
Capitalization.
Capitalization fees in Hayden are the same thing as your NUFs.
Okay.
So they were charging those at the time of preliminary plat to get the capitalization fees up front so that they could build out what the city's portion of infrastructure was. And the Supreme Court said, absolutely not. You have to pay for the infrastructure first, and then you can recapture it with your capitalization fees on the backs of those that come after. So you can't ask your development or your community or your ratepayers to basically prepay for infrastructure pieces. That's what that was.
So because they wanted to grow fast?
It was because they were
growing fast?
behind, and so they were,
Oh, they needed to.
they just
Got it.
were,
Card cut.
Advertising,
timing
Got it.
was wrong,
creative.
according
financing.
to the Supreme Court of Idaho.
Got it.
And North Idaho Building Contractors Association, NIPCA, is who sued the city of Hayden, and those contractors and those developers do talk, and they do work closely together, and when they see a hot button that they think needs to be challenged, they will do it as a core group, and that's what they should do.
Mhm.
So impact fees are kind of the same, a little bit of a hot button in the development community as Jeremy kind of alluded to, and so they'll be watching, and not that you won't do anything wrong if you're not discriminating against certain land uses or zones, or types of business, and you stay within the parameters of what comes out in your study. You can't just operate on, well, I think this and I think that. It's a data-driven process for a reason. But the political piece is where you just want to be really solid on your analysis. And you won't get in trouble because it'll go to council. That's where, that's what it
Yeah.
So along the same topic, if we have a joint powers agreement with like public safety in other cities, do any of the new growth in those other cities, since they may impact that in our city,
Like fire, is that what you're
like
talking about?
fire, or do we still have an agreement with like Kootenai for police?
No.
No,
You know, like what we did for a little while, I
Yeah,
think.
well,
So do those, how does that work?
so in those jurisdictions, like, I think the fire district you just mentioned a bit ago, that is a
Northside.
multi-jurisdictional taxing district. So school districts are also, even though we don't collect impact fees for school districts, but where you have multi-jurisdictional taxing districts right now for public safety, because the statute just changed like a year and a half ago. The jurisdictions where that entity serves can collect impact fees for that taxing district. So for instance, I represent Kootenai Fire down in Kootenai County. Kootenai Fire spans the city of Post Falls, part of the city of Coeur d'Alene, Kootenai County, the city of Hayden. And so all of the jurisdictions that are within the Kootenai Fire boundaries collect impact fees now for Kootenai Fire. But Kootenai Fire had to initiate that. We had to go to those jurisdictions and say, first of all, here's our capital improvement plan. Here are the projects for the district that are related to growth only. Here's what's growth eligible. And then here are it's called an intergovernmental agreement. Here's our proposed intergovernmental agreement that will allow you to collect those impact fees for us. And we set our own impact fees and the jurisdictions collect it for us. Does that help answer your question? That's just the best example I
Yeah,
can give you
yeah,
where we're doing that.
so it's possible and it's.
It is possible, and it's
And
being done,
is it being-
especially for public safety.
So it's being done with like Selkirk, like with what we have with,
No, they
No,
don't,
that's
they don't
totally
have,
different.
That's different, because they're not a separate taxing district. They're JPA. Selkirk Fire is
okay,
JPA.
so
So for instance, if,
joint powers don't
no,
include that.
no,
so.
Because that's a
Sago
temporary-
Fire wanted to facilitate with Bonner County and say, we want to charge impact fees for fire in our district. And they could
Okay,
work through that and do a study and
Bonner County could collect for them.
mhm. But also the thing to keep in mind is, for expenditure on most things, it has to have a useful life of 10 years. So you can't buy
mhm.
gloves, I mean,
Yeah.
it's gotta be.
And you can't spend it on wages, so you can't spend it on personnel and rolling stock. So fire trucks have been deemed to have a 10-year lifespan or longer. So the only rolling stock right now that fits the criteria are those larger vehicles. Police cars don't have a 10-year lifespan, so you can't use impact fees for police cars.
But like buildings
Buildings,
or expansion of
Mhm.
facilities.
growth related, yeah. So like we have 3 new fire stations going in down in Kootenai, and one of them is completely ineligible for any impact fee funds. So it was determined by the study to be, we're behind, basically. And but yet,
Okay.
the other 2, there is a percentage of that build out that's not already being paid for by the bond that the voters passed, that's eligible for impact fee funds.
So. Next question is utilities. Other communities use Sandpoint City utilities.
Wholly separate from an impact fee conversation.
It's a big challenge.
Yep.
Wow. So we just get hookup fees and
Yeah,
monthly.
yeah, wholly
monthly
separate from
dues.
impact.
Yep,
Alright.
it's on the 4-year plan.
Mhm.
Hmm.
But good questions,
Big challenge.
It's, I mean, we're all kind of connected in a lot of different ways. So
absolutely.
I think it's interesting that I mean, to me, the elephant in the room is that like one community has like a really open door for commercial activity. And I think eventually that door is gonna kind of close because of, you know, the amount of impact to their community with their infrastructure, with roads and so forth. They're gonna end up having to have as high or higher than what we may have. Although over the last 20 years, it's been favorable to them because of, you know, their expansion has been, you know, pretty big. And ours has probably not been as big because, maybe because of this, but maybe not, maybe it's just location. So yeah, there's a lot to think about with not just commercial or residential.
Right.
Industrial, et cetera,
And
so.
with your planning commission hat on, there's a great guy, Joe Minkowski, who does a really great visualization of your taxable value per square foot. So if you look at our downtown, arguably it's the most valuable land in Bonner County per square foot, even though it doesn't have the new commercial all going up everywhere, but, and that comes into play. We should do a planning commission, sort of seminar on, how the taxes work. The three-legged stool, commercial, industrial, and, residential. And Sarah can help me here, but take our valuation, our budget can only increase by 3% per year. So city's budget increases by 3%. We go from, you know, 10 million to 10.3 million. They take the taxable value of the city and divide it generally into the budget to come up with your mill levy. If your commercial property is worth a lot, okay, it's occupying most of that taxable valuation. So they're gonna be paying most of your property taxes. If there's a big downturn, commercial property is not worth anything. We still take that $10.3 million budget and we divide it by the value of our city, and the residential property would go up. So in general, industrial uses very few services. It's nice to have some industrial land because they pay a lot of taxes and don't demand services. But the thing I want to point out is that as those values go up and down, when you see your tax bill, your levy may go up or down, but that's what's really driving your tax bill. It's what are the values, what's the value of the city, and how does your house or your business, what portion of that total value does it represent?
Yes, in the last several years, we saw the residentials go way higher, so that's why you saw those go a lot higher. Yep.
Well, and the misconception is, the people have a misconception that it's directly connected to the value of their individual residence, but it's not.
No.
Mhm.
No,
Yeah, it's a
share.
proportionate
Yep.
share, yeah.
Yep.
Well, I know you have another meeting coming up. I'm gonna wish you luck and thanks for the service.
Do we need to-
Adjourn.
Yeah, we need to adjourn this one.
It's adjourned at 6:18.
Thanks for your service on the planning commission. I'll leave you in good hands with Amy and Sarah.